The silent departure commander James Rivera had occupied the same seat in the Galactic Assembly for 18 years. The chamber was a marvel of architectural achievement, a massive sphere where representatives from 93 species gathered to shape the future of known space. Crystalline walls refracted light from 3 suns, creating patterns that shifted with the time of day. The air hummed with translation devices, converting thousands of languages into comprehensible sound. James sat in Section 12, Row 47. The human delegation had always been placed there, far from the central podium where the High Counselors conducted business. It was not officially designated as the back section, but everyone knew what it meant. Newer species, less important voices, tolerated presence. He looked at the datapad in his hands. The proposal had taken his team 9 months to compile. 9 months of research, consultation with experts across human space, and careful diplomatic phrasing. The quantum relay network that connected the galaxy was degrading. Human scientists had identified the problem and developed a solution. The fix was elegant, cost-effective, and could be implemented within 6 months. This was the 5th time James had presented a critical proposal to the Assembly. The 5th time he had come with solutions to problems that threatened galactic stability. He thought about the previous 4. The membrane reactor crisis, where human engineers had prevented a chain reaction that would have destroyed 17 star systems. The Assembly had thanked the Valorian science minister who had signed off on the human plan, barely mentioning the humans who actually solved it. The Drakkar famine, where human agricultural specialists had saved billions from starvation. The Assembly had awarded medals to the Drakkar leaders who accepted the help, not to the humans who provided it. The Saurian plague, where human medical researchers had worked for 3 years to develop a cure. The Assembly had celebrated the Saurian recovery, crediting their own resilience. The Treaty of 7 Suns, where human diplomats had mediated a peace agreement between species that had been at war for 2 centuries. The Assembly had praised the combatants for their wisdom in choosing peace, never acknowledging who had brought them to the negotiating table. Each time, humans had done the work. Each time, others had received the credit. Each time, James had smiled politely and accepted it. That was what humans did. They helped. They solved problems. They made things better. Recognition did not matter as much as results, except it did matter. After 18 years, James was beginning to understand that it mattered very much. High Counselor Vexinar called the Assembly to order. His species, the Krell, had been traveling the stars for 8,000 years. They had discovered faster-than-light travel when humans were still building pyramids. In Vexinar's eyes, humanity was an infant species, barely worth noticing. The agenda moved forward. Discussions about trade regulations, debates about territorial boundaries, arguments about resource allocation, standard business. Then came the matter James had been waiting for, the selection of new members for the Security Directorate. The Security Directorate was the most powerful body in the galaxy. It consisted of 7 species who made decisions about military matters, crisis response, and emergency powers. It was the inner circle, the real leadership. For 150 years, humans had applied for a seat on the Directorate. For 150 years, they had been denied. Today, the Assembly would choose a new member to replace the retiring Arathian representative. 3 species had been nominated: the Zenthax, the Morvians, and humanity. James had prepared his statement carefully. He would speak about human contributions to galactic security. He would mention the 73 conflicts humans had helped resolve. He would cite the human peacekeeping forces that currently protected 18 worlds. He would present the case professionally and thoroughly. Vexinar announced the nominations. The chamber filled with discussion. James waited for his turn to speak. Then Counselor Drexmill of the Thorian Confederacy spoke up. His voice carried clearly through the translation systems. "The Thorian Confederacy must object to the human nomination," Drexnell said. "While we appreciate humanity's enthusiasm, the Security Directorate requires species with deeper experience in galactic affairs. Humans have been part of our community for only 150 years. Perhaps in another 1,000 years, they will be ready for such responsibility." Laughter rippled through the chamber. Not malicious laughter exactly, but the kind of amusement adults show when a child attempts something beyond their capability. Patronizing, dismissive. James felt something shift inside him. Not anger, not frustration. Something colder. Clarity. He thought about Captain Sarah Chun, who had spent 40 years commanding human peacekeeping forces. She had died last month, having given her entire adult life to protecting alien worlds. The Assembly had sent a standard condolence message. Nothing special. He thought about Dr. Marcus Webb, who had sacrificed his career to cure the Sarian plague. Marcus had been exposed to the disease during his research. The cure had saved billions, but Marcus would spend the rest of his life with chronic health problems. The Assembly had never even learned his name. He thought about Ambassador Lisa Park, who had negotiated the Treaty of Seven Suns. She had spent 3 years living in a cramped diplomatic station, working 18-hour days, missing the birth of her first grandchild. The treaty was called the greatest peace agreement in modern history. Lisa was not mentioned in the official records. He thought about the thousands of humans scattered across the galaxy. Engineers maintaining alien infrastructure. Doctors treating alien patients. Teachers educating alien children. Scientists solving alien problems. Workers doing jobs that needed doing, problems that needed solving. All of them doing it for species that would never respect them. The vote proceeded. The Zenthax were selected for the Security Directorate. The decision was unanimous. Every species voted for them. Even the Morvians, who had also been nominated, voted for the Zenthax. No one voted for humanity. Vexenar moved to the next agenda item without acknowledging the vote. It was routine business to him. Another day, another decision. Humanity had been denied again. So what? They had been denied before. They would apply again in another decade. That was how things worked. James stood up. His deputy, Maria Santos, looked at him with concern. James rarely interrupted proceedings. He was the model of diplomatic patience. "High Counselor," James said. His voice was calm, professional. Vexenar paused. "Yes, Commander Rivera? I wish to invoke Article 47 of the Galactic Compact." The chamber went quiet. Article 47 was rarely used. It was the formal withdrawal clause, allowing any member species to leave the Assembly with proper notice. Vexenar's expression shifted to something like confusion. "Commander, surely you do not mean—" "I do mean it," James said. "Humanity hereby invokes Article 47. We are withdrawing from the Galactic Assembly. Effective immediately, we will begin the process of removing our personnel, assets, and presence from all Assembly territories and projects. The withdrawal will be complete in 90 days as specified in the Compact." He transmitted the formal documentation to every representative system. Legal, proper, irrevocable. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Vexenar made a sound that resembled a sigh. "Commander Rivera, I understand you are disappointed by today's vote. But withdrawing from the Assembly is an extreme reaction. Perhaps if you take some time to reconsider—" "There is nothing to reconsider," James said. "This decision is not about today's vote. It is about 150 years of being treated as if we should be grateful you allow us to help you. It is about doing the work and watching others take the credit. It is about being called enthusiastic when we offer solutions, as if we are children playing at being adults." He looked around the chamber. 93 species, most of them barely paying attention. This was a minor inconvenience to them. A small species having a small tantrum. For 150 years, humanity has contributed to this assembly, James continued. We have solved your problems. We have fought your wars. We have healed your sick. We have fed your hungry. We have mediated your conflicts. And in return, you have given us nothing. Not recognition. Not respect. Not even basic courtesy. We have given you access to galactic civilization, Drexmill interrupted. That should be enough. James smiled. It was not a warm smile. You are correct, Counselor. That should have been enough. But it was not what you gave us. What you gave us was the privilege of serving you without acknowledgement. What you gave us was the opportunity to watch others receive credit for our work. What you gave us was 150 years of being tolerated, not respected. He closed his datapad. We are done. Humanity is withdrawing. We will fulfill all obligations during the 90-day notice period. We will leave everything in proper order. We will be professional to the end. But we will be leaving. ****. Vexnar examined the withdrawal documents. They were flawless. James had ensured that. If this is truly your decision, then the Assembly acknowledges your notice of withdrawal. We wish humanity well in their future endeavors. The High Counselor moved to the next agenda item. Just like that, 150 years of human membership, dismissed in a single sentence. The Assembly returned to their discussions. They had already forgotten. James walked out of the chamber. Maria followed him. Once they were in the corridor, she grabbed his arm. James, what did you just do? What we should have done a long time ago, he said. Send the message to Earth. Send it to every human installation in Assembly space. We are going home. The message went out within the hour. It reached human personnel on 417 worlds. It reached engineers working on alien infrastructure. It reached doctors in alien hospitals. It reached teachers in alien schools. It reached diplomats in alien capitals. It reached farmers on alien agricultural worlds. It reached scientists in alien research facilities. The message was simple and clear. Article 47 has been invoked. Humanity is withdrawing from the Galactic Assembly. All personnel are to begin orderly evacuation procedures. You have 90 days. Complete your current work. Document everything. Train replacements where possible. Be professional. Be courteous. Be thorough. And then come home. Across the galaxy, humans read the message. Some were shocked. Some were confused. But most, when they thought about it carefully, felt something unexpected. Relief. Dr. David Kim was working in a Xanthari medical facility when he received the message. He had spent 22 years there, developing treatments for diseases that affected 17 different species. His work had saved millions of lives. The Xanthari acknowledged his contributions politely, but he had never been invited to their medical conferences. His research papers were published with Xanthari names listed as primary authors. His suggestions were noted, filed, and forgotten until a Xanthari researcher proposed the same idea months later. He looked at the message for a long time. Then he smiled. He had 14 patients currently under his care. He would ensure they were stable. He would train his Xanthari replacement thoroughly. He would document everything. And then he would go home. Engineer Patricia Okonkwo was maintaining the power systems on a Krell orbital station. She had been there for 16 years. The station would have failed 5 times without her expertise. Each time, the Krell station commander had accepted her solution, implemented it, and taken credit for the repair. Patricia ate in separate facilities from the Krell workers. She was not invited to their social gatherings. When her innovations had saved the station from complete destruction 3 years ago, The commander had received a medal. Patricia had received a polite thank you message. She finished the repair she was working on. She wrote detailed instructions for her replacement. She started packing. She was going home. The pattern repeated across the galaxy. Humans began preparing to leave. They did not sabotage anything. They did not rage or complain. They simply began the quiet, professional work of departure. They completed current projects. They wrote comprehensive documentation. They trained local replacements as thoroughly as possible. They were courteous to the end, but they were leaving. All of them got in the Galactic Assembly. Most representatives barely noticed. A few individuals who had worked closely with humans felt concerned. Counselor Thrace of the Valorian Collective had collaborated with human scientists for years. She sent a message to her human colleagues, asking if they were certain about this decision. The response was polite, but firm. Yes, they were certain. It was time to go home. High. Counselor Vexinar reviewed reports about the withdrawal. He noted that humans were being professional about it. Good, that was appropriate. The disruption would be minimal. The assembly had functioned for 12,000 years before humans arrived. It would function perfectly well after they left. He assigned a junior aide to monitor the withdrawal process and ensure it proceeded smoothly. Then he turned his attention to more important matters. There were trade disputes to resolve, territorial claims to adjudicate, and resources to allocate. Humanity's departure was a minor administrative matter. Nothing more. James Rivera spent his final days in the assembly coordinating the withdrawal. He ensured every human installation had evacuation plans. He verified that documentation was being completed properly. He confirmed that local personnel were being trained. Everything had to be done correctly. Humanity would leave with dignity. On the 89th day, James stood in the assembly chamber one last time. It was nearly empty. Most representatives did not bother attending the final formalities. Vexinar was present, along with a handful of others. The withdrawal is complete, James reported. All human personnel have departed assembly space. All installations have been transferred to local control. All documentation has been provided. Humanity's obligations under the compact are fulfilled. The assembly acknowledges the completion of your withdrawal, Vexinar said. We thank humanity for their service and wish you well. James nodded. He did not say anything else. There was nothing left to say. He walked out of the chamber for the last time. His ship was waiting. Earth was waiting. Home was waiting. The last human vessel crossed into human-controlled space on day 90. Behind them lay the galaxy they had tried to be part of for 150 years. Ahead lay uncertainty, isolation, and an unknown future. But for the first time in 150 years, they would face that future with dignity. They would no longer beg for respect they would never receive. They would no longer accept being treated as inferiors. They would no longer watch others take credit for their work. Asterisk, they were going home. And the galaxy would have to learn to function without them. Earth received the returning personnel with celebration. Cities held parades. Leaders gave speeches about dignity and self-respect. The returning workers were treated as heroes. They had stood up for humanity's honor. They had refused to accept disrespect any longer. The mood was jubilant, but James did not feel jubilant. He felt tired and concerned. He knew what was coming. The galaxy would struggle without humanity. Systems would fail. Problems would go unsolved. Conflicts would escalate. And eventually, the assembly would realize what they had lost. But that realization would come too late. The damage was done. Trust had been broken. Respect had been denied for too long. Whatever relationship humanity had with the galaxy would never be the same. James stood at the window of his apartment in Geneva, looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the galaxy was continuing without humanity. Soon enough, they would understand what that actually meant. Soon enough, they would learn that taking people for granted has consequences. Soon enough, they would see what they had done. But by then, it would be too late to simply say sorry. Respect, once denied, could not be restored with words. It had to be earned through actions. And humanity would decide whether those actions were enough. Asterisk, for now, humanity turned inward. The returned workers brought knowledge and expertise. Scientists who had been solving alien problems now focused on human challenges. Engineers who had been maintaining alien infrastructure now improved human systems. Teachers who had been educating alien children now expanded human educational programs. Doctors who had been treating alien patients now advanced human medicine. For 150 years, humanity had been giving away its best minds, its greatest innovations, its hardest workers. Now, suddenly, all of that talent was focused on human worlds. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Human colonies thrived. Human technology advanced rapidly. Human society strengthened. They were not isolated. They still had their own network connecting human space. They still traded among themselves. They still explored. But they did it for themselves now, not for others who would never appreciate it. And they were happier. The constant stress of seeking approval from species that would never give it was gone. Humans could simply be human. They could work for their own benefit. They could build their own future. The galaxy continued its business. The assembly moved forward with its agenda. Most representatives had already forgotten about humanity's departure. It had been a minor event. 90 days of administrative procedures, and then it was done. Life went on, but in the quiet spaces between meetings, in the maintenance tunnels beneath the great stations, in the hospitals and schools and farms across hundreds of worlds, small problems were beginning to appear. Equipment that had always worked was malfunctioning. Systems that had always been reliable were showing errors. Projects that had always proceeded smoothly were encountering difficulties. Asterisk. Nothing catastrophic. Not yet. Just small problems. Easily overlooked. Barely noticeable. The galaxy had no idea what was coming. Asterisk the reckoning. 3 months after the last human ship departed assembly space, the first major failure occurred. The quantum relay network, which connected thousands of star systems and enabled faster-than-light communication, experienced a cascading malfunction in the outer rim sectors. 17 star systems lost contact with the rest of the galaxy simultaneously. High Counselor Vexnar reviewed the emergency reports with growing concern. The relays had been functioning perfectly for centuries. Now, suddenly, they were failing. He assigned the assembly's top engineers to investigate. They examined the relay stations, analyzed the data, and ran diagnostics. After 2 weeks of investigation, they submitted their findings. The report was technical and detailed, but the conclusion was simple. The relay network required a specific type of maintenance that prevented harmonic resonance buildup. Without this maintenance, the relays would continue failing in a cascading pattern. Within 6 months, the entire network would be offline. Vexnar read the report twice. Then he asked the obvious question. How do we perform this maintenance? The chief engineer, a Thorian named Kexival, looked uncomfortable. The maintenance protocols were developed by human technicians. They implemented them across the network over the past century. We have the documentation they left behind, but the procedures are complex. They require intuitive understanding of quantum field interactions. Then learn the procedures, Vexnar said. You are the finest engineers in the galaxy. Surely you can follow human documentation. Kexival nodded, but his expression remained troubled. We are attempting to do so, High Counselor. But there are gaps in the documentation. The humans understood certain principles instinctively. They did not fully document their reasoning because to them it was obvious. To us, it is not obvious. The engineers tried for another month. They managed to restore 2 of the 17 failed relay stations. The other 15 remained offline. Worse, 3 more stations failed during their repair attempts. The cascade was accelerating. On Centauri Prime, Dr. Velmos was dealing with a different crisis. A new strain of Centauri fever had appeared. It was similar to strains they had encountered before, but different enough to resist existing vaccines. The monitoring system that had protected Centauri worlds for decades was supposed to detect such mutations and automatically adjust the vaccine formulations. The system was not working properly. Dr. Vilmos examined it carefully. The system had been designed and maintained by human medical researchers. When they left, they had trained Centauri doctors to operate it. But operating a system was not the same as understanding it. The system was showing a mutation, but Velmos could not determine if it was significant. The human doctors had possessed some ability to recognize patterns that the Centauri had not yet mastered. Dr. Kim, who had worked on Centauri Prime for 22 years, had always known which mutations mattered and which did not. Velmos did not have that knowledge. He decided to wait and monitor the situation. Perhaps the mutation would prove harmless. Perhaps the existing vaccines would be sufficient. Perhaps there was no need for alarm. Within 2 weeks, Centauri fever cases began appearing. Within a month, there were thousands of infections. The existing vaccines were only 40% effective against the new strain. People were dying. Dr. Velmos worked frantically to develop a new vaccine. He followed the protocols the humans had left behind. He used the equipment they had designed. But something was missing. Some crucial understanding that Dr. Kim had possessed, but had not fully documented. The new vaccine Velmos created was only 55% effective. Better than nothing, but not good enough. The epidemic spread to 3 neighboring systems. The death toll climbed into the thousands. In the Valorian agricultural sectors, the harvest season was approaching. Councillor Thrace reviewed the crop projections with dismay. Yields were down 40% across all 12 worlds that humans had helped restore after the Great Famine. The local farmers were following the procedures the humans had documented. They were doing everything according to the instructions. But farming was not about following instructions. It was about understanding the land, reading subtle signs in soil and plants, knowing when to adjust techniques based on conditions that changed daily. The human agricultural specialists had possessed this understanding. They had tried to teach it, but there was no way to fully document intuition. The Valorian farmers were competent. They were hardworking, but they did not have the deep expertise the humans had developed over generations. They did not know what the humans knew. The crops were suffering as a result. Thrace sent emergency requests for food imports. Other agricultural worlds tried to help, but they were experiencing similar problems. Across the galaxy, food production was declining. Not catastrophically, but enough to cause concern. Enough to drive prices upward. Enough to threaten worlds that had only recently escaped famine. The small problems were becoming larger problems. And the larger problems were beginning to connect. The Drucker Confederacy and the Sarian Alliance had maintained peaceful relations for 18 years, ever since human mediators had negotiated the Treaty of Meridian. But old tensions remained beneath the surface. Border disputes, resource claims, historical grievances. The human diplomatic staff had been skilled at managing these tensions, quietly resolving small conflicts before they escalated. Without human mediators, the small conflicts were not being resolved. They were accumulating. A trade ship detained at a Drucker checkpoint. A Sarian mining operation expanding into disputed territory. Harsh words exchanged at a diplomatic reception. Each incident alone was minor. Together, They were rebuilding the hostility that had existed before. Ambassador Vexcora of the Drakkar Confederacy tried to resolve the issues through direct negotiation with his Sarian counterparts. But he lacked the cultural understanding the human diplomats had possessed. The humans had spent years studying both societies, learning their values and customs, understanding how they thought. Vexcora was doing his best, but his best was not enough. A Sarian patrol ship fired on a Drakkar freighter in disputed space. The freighter was damaged, but not destroyed. The Drakkar military demanded retaliation. The Sarian government refused to apologize, claiming their patrol ship had acted in self-defense. Both sides mobilized their fleets. Within a week, the Drakkar-Sarian War had begun. It started as skirmishes in border systems. Then it escalated. Planets were blockaded. Stations were destroyed. Thousands died in the first month of fighting. The Assembly tried to mediate. They sent their most experienced diplomats. But those diplomats lacked the deep understanding of both cultures that the human mediators had possessed. Every attempt to negotiate peace failed. The war continued. Counselor Thrace was becoming increasingly alarmed. She began compiling data, tracking all the problems that had emerged since humanity's departure. She was a scientist by training. She needed to understand what was happening. She created a comprehensive database of system failures, medical crises, agricultural problems, diplomatic breakdowns, and infrastructure issues. Then she cross-referenced that database with records of human involvement before the withdrawal. The results were shocking. She reviewed them 3 times, certain she had made an error. But the numbers did not change. 87% of galactic infrastructure had involved human expertise in design, implementation, or maintenance. 73% of medical services relied on systems designed or maintained by human doctors. 91% of diplomatic resolutions over the past 50 years had involved human mediators. 64% of scientific breakthroughs in the past century had included human researchers. Humans had not just been contributing to galactic civilization. They had been essential to it. They had been the foundation upon which everything else rested. And no one had noticed because their work had been so competent, so reliable, so consistent. They had solved problems before anyone else knew the problems existed. They had maintained systems so well that those systems seemed to maintain themselves. They had prevented conflicts so effectively that others forgot conflicts happened. Their work had been invisible precisely because it was excellent. Thrace stared at her data for hours. She thought about her human colleagues, the scientists she had worked with for decades. She remembered Dr. Chun, who had solved the membrane reactor crisis. She remembered Engineer Okonkwo, who had kept the Krell station functioning. She remembered Ambassador Park, who had negotiated the Treaty of Seven Suns. She remembered how the Assembly had treated them. The casual dismissals, the stolen credit, the patronizing attitudes, the assumption that humans should be grateful for the opportunity to help. And she felt something she had never felt before when thinking about Assembly policies. She felt ashamed. Thrace requested an emergency session of the Assembly. She needed to present her findings. The galaxy needed to understand what was happening before the situation deteriorated further. High Counselor Vexinar granted her request, though he seemed puzzled by the urgency. The Assembly chamber was full when Thrace took the speaker's platform. Representatives from all 93 species were present. She activated her presentation, and data filled the space above her. For the past 3 months, the galaxy has experienced unprecedented system failures, she began. Communication networks failing, medical crises spreading, agricultural production declining, diplomatic relations collapsing, infrastructure malfunctioning. We have treated these as separate problems. They are not separate. They are connected. She displayed her correlation data. The representatives watched as charts and graphs demonstrated the relationship between human involvement and system functionality. For 150 years, humans were integrated into virtually every aspect of galactic civilization, Thrace continued. They were not just participants. They were essential. They were the engineers who maintained our infrastructure, the doctors who designed our medical systems, the diplomats who prevented our wars, the farmers who ensured our food security, the scientists who drove our innovation. She paused, letting the data speak for itself. Some representatives looked uncomfortable. Others looked skeptical. We did not see their importance because they performed their work so well, Thrace said. They solved problems before we knew problems existed. They maintained systems so effectively that we assumed the systems maintained themselves. They were everywhere, doing everything, and we treated them as if they should be grateful we allowed them to help us. She displayed projections of galactic decline if current trends continued. The graphs showed economic collapse, infrastructure failure, and widespread conflict within 5 years. Complete civilizational breakdown within 20 years. We need them back, Thrace said simply. Not because they need us, because we need them. We have spent 150 years taking their contributions for granted. Now we are paying the price for that arrogance. The chamber erupted in debate. Some representatives agreed with Thrace's assessment. Others argued that she was exaggerating the problem. Still others insisted that reaching out to humanity would show weakness. Counselor Drexmill of the Thorian Confederacy stood. Even if Counselor Thrace's analysis is correct, humanity made their choice. They abandoned the galaxy. They withdrew from the assembly. Why should we beg them to return? Because billions of lives are at stake, Thrace replied. Because our civilization is collapsing without them. Because pride is a poor substitute for survival. High Counselor Vexenor had been silent throughout the presentation. Now he spoke, his voice carrying the weight of 8,000 years of Krell history. Counselor Thrace's data is compelling. The correlation between human departure and system failures is undeniable. However, we must consider carefully how we approach humanity. We cannot simply demand their return. We must offer them something of value. What could we possibly offer them? Another representative asked. They have isolated themselves. They have rejected galactic civilization. Vexenar was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that shocked the entire assembly. We can offer them what we should have offered 150 years ago. Respect, recognition, equality, not as junior members, not as enthusiastic newcomers, as full and equal partners in galactic civilization. The debate continued for hours. Finally, the assembly voted to authorize a diplomatic mission to human space. They would go to Earth. They would speak with human leadership. They would attempt to negotiate humanity's return to the assembly. But there was a problem. The assembly had spent 150 years not bothering to truly understand humanity. They did not know human culture deeply. They did not understand human values. They had no idea how to properly approach a species. They had spent over a century dismissing. Vexenar assigned Thrace to lead the delegation. She had worked closely with humans. She had respected them. Perhaps she could bridge the gap. Thrace accepted the assignment with deep misgivings. She remembered the faces of her human colleagues when they had said goodbye. The quiet dignity. The unspoken pain. The relief at finally leaving Dot, she began preparing for the mission. She studied human history, human philosophy, human art. She tried to understand what motivated them, what they valued, what they needed. One thing became clear very quickly. Humans valued respect above almost everything else. Their entire history was a story of fighting for dignity, demanding to be treated as equals, refusing to accept inferior status. The assembly would have to offer more than trade deals and economic incentives. They would have to offer genuine respect. They would have to acknowledge their mistakes. They would have to humble themselves before a species they had spent generations treating as inferiors. Thrace wondered if the assembly was capable of that kind of humility. She wondered if Vexenar, with his 8,000 years of Krell superiority, could truly treat humans as equals. She wondered if the galaxy could change enough to deserve humanity's return. She sent a message to Earth. It was formal and carefully worded. The Galactic Assembly requests an audience with human leadership to discuss matters of mutual concern and potential cooperation. We hope humanity will grant us the opportunity for dialogue. The response came 3 days later. It was brief and cold. Your delegation will be received. Arrival coordinates attached. Nothing more. No warmth, no friendliness. Just acknowledgement. The formality of it troubled Thrace deeply. Humans had always been warm, helpful, eager to cooperate. This cold distance meant something had fundamentally changed. The relationship had been damaged in ways that might be irreparable. The delegation prepared to depart. Vexenar would lead it personally, along with Thrace and representatives from the species most affected by humanity's absence. They loaded their ships with data documenting the galactic crisis. They prepared proposals for renewed cooperation. They rehearsed their arguments, but Thrace had a sinking feeling that arguments would not be enough. Data would not be enough. Proposals would not be enough. The assembly had broken something precious. Trust, respect, the belief that they valued human contributions. Those things, once broken, could not be repaired with presentations and proposals. As their ships prepared to depart for Earth, Thrace looked at the star maps. So many worlds where humans had worked. So many places they had helped. So many lives they had improved. All left behind because the galaxy could not manage basic respect. She thought about what humanity must have endured. 150 years of contributing, helping, solving, building, healing. 150 years of watching others take credit. 150 years of being treated as if they should be grateful for the opportunity to serve. The emotional weight of that must have been crushing, and yet humans had remained professional to the end. They had not sabotaged anything. They had not raged or destroyed. They had simply left, quietly and with dignity. That said something important about their character. They were better than the galaxy that had mistreated them. The ships engaged their drives and set course for human space. Behind them lay a galaxy in crisis. Ahead lay a confrontation that would determine the future of galactic civilization. The assembly was about to learn what humanity had become in their absence. They were about to discover whether the damage they had caused could ever be repaired. And they were about to face a truth that terrified Thrace more than any system failure or diplomatic crisis. Humanity did not need the galaxy anymore. They had thrived in isolation. They had focused their talents on themselves. They had built something strong and independent. The galaxy needed humanity desperately. But humanity might not need the galaxy at all. And if that was true, then the assembly would have to offer something extraordinary to convince them to return. They would have to prove they had changed. They would have to demonstrate genuine respect. They would have to earn what they should have given freely 150 years ago. Thrace did not know if the assembly was capable of that. She did not know if the galaxy deserved a second chance. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. If humanity rejected the assembly's proposal, no one would have the right to blame them. The galaxy had created this situation. Now they would face the consequences of their arrogance. The ships crossed into human space. Earth was waiting. The reckoning had begun. Asterisk.